If the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem will soon begin looking like a nail. Life is a toolkit. You keep collecting tools as you go along, and in every space you reach, your ability to thrive or to fail is determined by the quality and the diversity of the toolkit you arrive with. The next generation workplace is not an amplification or a replication of former workspaces. It is different. And if we are going to raise authentic workers to occupy these authentically different workspaces, we will need to embrace this reality and not just merely equip them with literal or proverbial hammers in the hope that the only thing they will encounter in the workspace are nails. But we will need to be able to make them have a toolkit as diverse as possible, understanding that the demands and the change, both in terms of quantity and rate of the new generation's workspace, will be immensely different. What's the difference between a dream and a goal? The difference is simple. Dreams and goals, unlike dreams, have a timeline, they have a definite output, but they are made possible through a process called work. If we are going to raise an authentic generation that is not dreamers but is truly workers, we will need to be able to equip them with the right toolkit that will help them build this necessary bridge of work that transforms possibilities into realities, that transforms dreams into actually tangible, feasible, measurable goals. We will need a proper toolkit to equip people for the next generation's workspace. Work, the four-letter word that means different things to different people, but the four-letter word without which we will never have what we need to have in this world. Work. The thing which in the Bible story of Genesis, as written by Moses, was actually given to human beings before the advent of sin. But it seems a thing everybody wants to run away from. Heck, we love the weekend more than we do love the work week. But work is going to be important. It's a thing that puts food on the table. It's a thing that gives some people a sense of meaning and of importance. It occupies our time. And didn't an old adage say, idle vessels make the most noise? So yes, work also reduces our opportunity to get into mischief or ruin. But the world of work is changing. And it is something we no longer can ignore. As Christians and as people raising the next generation, we need to have an authentic conversation around the whole issue of work. And how do we get ready? Specifically, what does the next generation's workplace look like? What factors are shaping it? What's changing it? And how do we equip ourselves and the next generation to make the most of that? My name is Saya. This is Acacia, an authentic chat about conversations you and I would rather avoid. And we continue with this season 2, which is all about raising an authentic generation and specifically preparing them for the workplace of the future. Welcome. Today we focus on our story, the prodigal son, and we are reading the book of Luke chapter 11, and we are considering from verses 14 all the way to verse 23. Let's listen in.
Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate.
Now, one thing becomes very interesting when you consider the story through the lens of work. It's very fascinating for me that when the prodigal son leaves home, he has left a home that is bustling with activity. The father has servants, he has livestock, it appears he has fields. So there's no shortage of work out there. But you begin noticing very quickly that the boy is very inept, ill-prepared for the world of work that exists outside the environment he has become acclimatized with. No wonder in Luke 11, verse 14, when Luke records how Jesus told this story, he says that when a famine happened, this boy who had already wasted his substance on riotous living fell immediately into hard times. And you see him coming all the way to working around the whole pigsty situation. But what's more is he does not even seem to be thriving in that space. He is even at a position he is ready to partake of the pig's food. So he's barely surviving in the world of work. He is nowhere close to thriving. What's more, when he finally comes to his senses, the height to which he can reimagine work is going back home to be a servant, is to going back and replugging to what is known, to what is familiar, to what is comfortable, to what is easy. This boy is in bad shape. Number one, when disruption occurred as a result of the famine, he completely lacked a toolkit to be able to see him through. Number two, his imagination of what constituted work was going back to the known, to the friendly, to the familiar, and probably to the comfortable. In fact, he was willing to cede his position or title as a son and be able to settle for the role of a servant. This is somebody whose upbringing is wanting as far as ability to anticipate and be ready for the world of work really looked like. It seems almost scandalous to imagine that a boy raised up in an environment that was robust with work opportunities steps out into the real world and is exceedingly wanting when it comes to being able to be adept at adapting to the world of work outside of the confines of what is known. But this is not something just tucked away to a story 2,000 years ago. It is sadly very true with the reality of many of the next generation workers. The way we've trained them, the way they're being raised up, and sadly even the way the church is handling them seems to be completely disjointed to the world of work. I've had the privilege of serving as a manager, and I've had the privilege of serving as a human resource, human capacity development specialist for a period of more than 5 years. In the roles I played, I had the honor and the blessing of hiring people across the continent of Africa and then supporting their growth and their development. I would report that from my own personal experience, because the people I was hiring were graduates and the people I was supporting were graduates from university, it was very concerning. Actually, extremely concerning that many of them arrived with nothing more than head knowledge at best, but completely ill-prepared for the world of genuine work. Their resilience was at an all-time low. Any slight change in the workspace or a pivot in the direction the company was going was enough to make them feel rudderless and clueless. It manifested itself very often in attitudes of complaining or of just the inability to cope with changes, and the threshold for panic was shockingly very low. It concerned me as a worker then, and concerned me more deeply as a Christian, because, as is the case in many places in Africa, the church takes a substantial amount of time from an individual's life every single week. If you're a Sabbath keeper like I am, we observe a full Sabbath rest from Friday sunset through to Saturday sunset. It means there is almost a period of give or take 8 hours that is given to the church. And then you've not added periods where you come for choir practice or for a church meeting and everything. And I remember doing a computation, and it seems that in any given 7-day week, the amount of time given to the church is anywhere between 2 working days or the equivalent of 3 working days, a period of, say, 24 hours scattered in pockets of time. So it concerns me that even for individuals of faith who do a lot of work in the church, still exit the church process, and when they go to the world of work are found wanting. What is it that academia, as well as the church, is unable to anticipate with the world of work? What can they do better to be able to prepare people for this respective world of work? Let's re-examine parallels between the prodigal son story and the world today. In Luke 11, verse 14, Luke indicates that when Jesus was telling the story, he said one of the things that occurred to the young man when he left home is that a famine happened. In the Middle East, where this story is told, is largely in a time when they were an agrarian-based economy, and the bigger bulk of the agriculture they practiced was rain-fed. Therefore, an event like famine was an extremely big disruption to life as they knew it, and it would affect not only output, it would also affect which way livelihood would be able to go. So famine, as indicated in the story, which exposed the wanting nature of this young man, indicates a form of disruption. For that particular economy, the disruption at that time was the loss of rain. And yes, in this age and time, the workplace of the future is being affected by disruptions. Back in my mother's days, one of the most popular jobs people aimed for was called secretarial work. People took entire secretarial courses where people would learn to run the typewriter and be able to organize things. And then somebody came up with a clever idea of coming up with a computer. And now secretarial work was almost in a blink wiped out. I remember in the early 90s when automated teller machines, ATMs, were coming in, there was panic because individuals who had carved out an entire career are just being nothing more but bank tellers felt really threatened, and they needed to. And in nowadays, I have been able to stay around coders for quite a while, and I realize there's a lot of disruption coming in through technologies. An interesting case online where a young person was able to litigate a very complicated case because they just depended on material that has been digitalized and provided, and were able to litigate their cases. Architects, in at least the part of them that draws and designs building, is threatened because there's a lot of stuff being put out there and tools that people can be able to use to design their buildings. In other words, I'm simply saying it this way, is there's a lot of disruption, and a lot of it is being brought around by technology. what was famine in the story of the prodigal son is maybe now a computer or a smartphone or some piece of technology or a new app is going to begin bringing this. So one reality for the workplace of the future is it is a heavily disrupted, digitally disrupted workspace. The secondly, thing that happens is there is a lot of digitization that is happening now. I dare say anything that can be digitized will be digitized. You see, in the story of the prodigal son, the son is sent into a new domain. Jesus is speaking to a dominantly Jewish audience who would consider the pig unclean. And therefore, for the boy who is ostensibly probably Jewish to the audience that is being addressed there, to come to a point where he is willing to plug himself into a profession that would be considered unclean and undesirable, just shows the total desperation that he had fallen into. And it means that markets, because of the disruption that had happened, things that were initially unthinkable have now become possible. New and different possibilities have been created, which is a dominant reality in the world of work looking forward. That as digitization is happening, as digital disruption is going to happen, there are going to be areas which initially were not thought of as being very cool that are going to actually be cool. Think of, for instance, we will need, at least in my economy, people who work with their hand, whether it's carpenters or people who do joinery or welding or electricians, are right now, at least in my economy, not looked at very highly. But in the world of work going forward, this will be skills that will be extremely rare, but also extremely well rewarding. What was pigs to Jesus' audience is probably going to be plumbing in my generation and in the next generation. In other words, as more and more things will become more digitized, the individuals who are able to do things with their hands, farming, joining, fixing, will probably become really high stakes, high value things. Things that were ill thought of or frowned upon in the past are going to be things that are going to be extremely precious going forward. In this world of continuous change, we need to begin reorienting the minds of the people to imagine the skills of the future. The third thing that is changing in the story of Jesus' time is you notice the boy shifts from being the one with the means and the one giving, and now he becomes the one who needs to begin providing service and offering service. He moves from the guy with the money being served to becoming the person who is being served. There's a whole change that happens in the delivery and the supply chain. And a similar change is going to affect the world of work as we look at the workplace of the future, is going to change in terms of the delivery methods that are used. Already we've seen vehicle hailing apps like Uber changing completely the world of taxis. Every time I take an Uber ride, I usually just have a candid conversation with the Uber riders and we all smile. In Kenya, in Nairobi, where I am based, it used to happen that the fee you are charged for a taxi ride was dependent on where you're going and how you're dressed. So your dress code would already put you at a certain figure, and dare you mention that you're going to somewhere like the airport, the figure would be astoundingly high. It doesn't matter the length of time you travel, just the idea you're going to the airport was presumed you have money. But now we're in a world where, because of the taxi hailing app, such considerations of dress code, of the prestige of the place you're going to, are eliminated completely. The way of delivery has completely been changed. I remember even preachers in the past taking a swipe at social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and being able to speak against the whole idea of using iPads and things like that in worship. And hello, a pandemic came knocking, and we began realizing these platforms are amoral. They don't have morality. They only acquire the morality you give to or gain to them. And now people who'd been trained to deliver messages through a brick and mortar with tangible individuals begin even realizing that the very craft of preaching itself is not immune to what's happening in the world of work, that the mode of delivery needs to be able to change, both in terms of the platforms and therefore the rules and the mode of engagement that needs to happen. Again, a recap. The three things that are changing in the world of work is, number one, there is going to be a lot of disruption. Number two, there's a lot of digitization. And number three, there's a change in the mode of delivery. Not too long ago, the whole idea of working from home was seen as not having a job or was seen as an excuse for laziness. But now it's become the modus operandi for almost every other person. Now, when you say I work from home, you're not seen as an outlandish person, you're seen as one with it. It's just that the pandemic, corona, we've lived through has accelerated this, but all along the trajectory had always shown that this was going to be a thing that is coming. The question is, how do we prepare people for these changes that are happening to the world of work? When I see the Bible, specifically still the story of the prodigal son, I see three things that need to be done. Number one is a change in worldview. You see, what happens to this young man is the worldview he goes with from home into the world of work is wrong. He goes in prepared to be served and not to serve. He goes imagining that his money and the lavish thing he had was what was going to be needed. But he soon arrives and he realizes he has a very wrong worldview. Now, worldview is not what you, is not just how you view the world, but worldview is the lens you use to look to the world. If you have a greenish pair of lenses, everything you behold will soon look green. It looks like this young boy had looked at the world of work from the comfortable lenses of home. And the idea he had of the world of work was completely wrong and completely different from what actually existed on the ground. To prepare people for the future of the world of work, the first thing, especially as believers, we will need to do is give them a proper worldview. We need a biblical view of work, and the beauty is the Bible has a 1500-year head start on this, because in the 1500 years within which the Bible is written, God has a lot to say about work. Paul says, he who does not work should not eat. The book of Proverbs 22:29 says, do you see a man who is diligent in his business? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before mean men. So the Bible has a very robust worldview, specifically about work and its role and place. In fact, when you read Genesis chapter 2 verse 15, it says, God took the man whom he had formed and he placed him in the garden to dress it and to keep it. So in the Bible understanding, even before sin, there was work, not as punishment, but as something that God gave to be able to help individuals build up their capacity to the fullest. To prepare for the world of changing work, we'll need a proper worldview. And I'm glad that the Bible provides a robust worldview, that all those who want to engage meaningfully with the future world of work can be able to rely on the wisdom and the coordinates the Bible has to give to make sense of the changing terrain of work. The second thing is we will need a plan to be able to widen. Widening here means the ability to grow our capabilities in response to the realities that are outside. Widening here means being able to look at the changing terrain and adapt accordingly. For all the flack I keep giving the prodigal son, the one thing at least he seems to do correctly is being able to realize, hey, there's a farmer in here, I need to look for something. Although when you read it within context, he was more reactive rather than responded. He reacted. He realizes, hey, I'm broke, I need something. But at least let's give him some credit here. He was able to adapt to some of the realities. What we want to do is go one step better than the prodigal son did, where he was more reactive, but become more responsive. So a plan of widening is looking at, hey, what's changing? For instance, we realize whereas oil was the money maker in the old world, data is the new oil in this new world. Whereas learning English or whichever in vogue language was there was a thing for the old world of work. In the new world of work, software might actually be, and learning to write a programming language might actually be one of the literacy skills we will need to equip people there. So in order to have, say, our children who are going to walk into this new disrupted and digitized world, it probably would make lots of sense to give them some time to learn coding. Who knows, maybe Christian children clubs like Pathfinder and Adventurers need to begin learning Python and Ruby on Rails or Java or JavaScript as part of their Pathfinder orders to be able to help them be ready for the world of work. But the second thing is an elaborate plan to widen, which examines the changing terrain and acquires the respective skills to get you there. Proverbs chapter 18 verse 16 says, "A man's gift will make room for him and bring him before great men." So the Bible does recognize that there is need for people to leverage their gifts as a thing that will bring them before opportunities to advance themselves, opportunities to acquire means, opportunities to solve problems that benefit many more. So number one, we will need is, number two, we will need a plan for widening, and number one we will need is a plan for worldview. But then the third thing that people will need is a plan to be able to try out their abilities. To move from the old world of work into the new world of work is a big chasm, is a very big jump. And so what we need is smaller opportunities for people to keep leveraging and learning, refining and improving. This little boy, the reason he retreats back to his father is because he was not well equipped to make the move during a time of famine, and therefore he does what most human beings would do. He retreated back to what was known, what was familiar, what was comfortable. In fact, he is even willing to be a servant in a space where what is possible for him is to be a master. This is a shocking realizing that he is not well equipped. Now, to prepare people for these smaller incremental changes, they will need to learn a few things. Number one is that everything worth having is going to have to be built. It's not going to be bought. We're not going to suddenly buy skills. We will need to build them progressively over time. We'll need to structure our churches as places where people build skills and not just wait at some magical end for them to acquire them. We'll need to organize our playtime, our downtime as opportunities where people will build things. Because when it comes to incrementally growing, we'll need to realize we will build, we will not buy. The second thing to make this possible is to realize that it will work on the premise of product coming after process. For you to be the final product, for you to be the person who's well equipped for that thing, it'll have to follow a process. And the process will mean apprenticeships. The process will mean coming back and learning. The process will mean looking around and being able to get people who are smarter than you and learning from them. But for us to be the product, to be workers who are well adept for this particular new terrain, it'll have to follow process. It is because the prodigal son jettisoned the process. He was restless at home. Instead of being at home and learning as much as he could, he was restless at home, and when he left home and went into the world of work and fending for himself, he was shockingly, completely ill-prepared for it. But similarly, what we need to do is structure our homes, structure our churches, structure our schools as a place where by process people are acquiring the tangible, literal skills that they will need to become equipped for the ever-changing world of work. So number one is to remember we will need to build, we will not buy. And the number two, we will need to remember that it is the process that will come before the product. It's amazing what God is able to tuck in a story. It's amazing how God is so foresighted in any story. He understands the world of work will change, but he does not want us to be caught flat-footed. He understands that there will be disruptions, that there will be digitizations that will change the world of work. But he wants us to build a worldview. He wants us to be able to a worldview that will help us get through to that. He wants us to be able to build the rhythms and the opportunities that we'll be able to get there. we can build an authentic generation for the changing world of work, and together we can raise an authentic generation. Stay with the conversation.